Hi AP Psychology students, and welcome to our next video. Today we're going to be talking about memory retrieval. So as you can recall, in the last couple of videos we talked about the introduction to memory, we talked about memory encoding, talked about memory storage, and today we're going to talk about the process of memory retrieval. So our kind of essential questions that we want to answer today is how do we retrieve memories from our long-term memory, and what cues can impact our retrieval? So when we are talking about retrieval, right, just kind of some background information. In order for a memory to be retrieved, it must be pulled from our long-term memory, that's that LTM, into our working memory to be utilized. So when we talk about retrieval, we are talking about the long-term memory, which a lot of us think about, but also the working memory, right? We need both of those aspects to do the retrieval. Memories are held in our long-term memory storage, right? Remember we talked about the storage of, we have the explicit memories and the implicit memories. So that long-term memory storage has a web of associations. If you look at this graphic I have over here about the fire truck, the idea is that every memory we have is connected to other memories and other associations of ideas and concepts. And in order for us to retrieve the memory, the more associations we have, it acts like anchors that hold down the memory so that it doesn't get lost. Another way that I like to think about this is the story of Hansel and Gretel, where they had to go back home and they used breadcrumbs to make a trail, and the breadcrumbs got blown away and they couldn't find their way home. So the idea here is that the more associations, the more breadcrumb trails you lay down, the easier it is for you to retrieve a memory because there's more paths for you to access it. Now, when you go to retrieve a memory, you can retrieve it in two different ways. You can either retrieve it through recall or through recognition. And these are concepts that I did mention in our introduction video. So when we do recall, what we're doing is actually producing the information that we've learned. So we are not having any help. We are just blatantly just pulling it from our long-term memory. This is kind of like a fill-in-the-blank question, or if someone just asks you a question like, hey, what's the Spanish word for ears? This can be very difficult. Even if we know the information, we might not be able to just pull it from memory and produce it all on our own. We might need help with identifying it, and that would be our recognition memory. So when we identify it, we have some different prompts or words or pictures or something to help us with that information. An example would be a multiple choice question. If you look here, what of the following is the Spanish word for ears? You may not have been able to tell me when I asked you to recall it, but now that I'm asking you to recognize it, you might know that the answer is B, ojos. So that's an example of a recall versus a recognition task. And as you probably guessed, and as you know, because most students prefer multiple choice, our recognition memory is superior to our recall memory. So if you take a look at this graph, you see on the y-axis we have that retention is the percentage that we retain, right? And if we start off at 100, and then one day later I ask you to recognize some information you learned, you'll do it about 75% accuracy. If I ask you to recall it, produce it all on your own with no identification cues to help, you're going to end up at about 20%. So that's a significant difference in the amount you remember. Now, whether or not we're using recognition or recall, we're going to be using the idea of retrieval cues. So these retrieval cues are anything in your environment or kind of in your mind, smells, sounds, tastes, sights, thoughts, that trigger a memory or trigger a specific way to remember that memory. So what are some examples of this? There can be intentional and unintentional retrieval cues. An intentional retrieval cue might be like, you know you want to remember to text your friend before you leave the house, so you leave your phone right by the door, and that way you hope that when you are leaving the house, you see the phone and you think, oh, I have to text so-and-so, right? That would be an intentional retrieval cue. The phone is the cue for the memory. An unintentional retrieval cue could be something like a smell that you never really thought to help you remember something, but it triggers a memory. An example for me is my boyfriend in high school always used Carmex for lip balm, and so now whenever I smell that kind of Carmex smell, it reminds me of high school, my boyfriend, etc. Right? And that wasn't intentional, right? That was unintentional. So there are some specific retrieval cues that we've studied that we know impact our memory. The first one, before I tell you, I want to do a little demonstration. Okay, so answer the following questions aloud as I ask them. Ready? Spell mop. Spell hop. Spell top. What do you do at a green light? Did you say stop? Did you think stop and then correct yourself, right? So what happened there? That is an example of priming. So what I did is I tried to activate associations in your brain that were connected to stop, right? Mop, hop, top, rhymes with stop, has a similar ending, etc. So when I then asked you about the green light, you know that at stoplights you go and you stop, and you know at a green light you go. But I had activated those cues that were ending in op, right? And so you more readily came up with stop rather than go. This is called priming, right? And it was unconscious. You didn't know you were doing it, but I activated those memory networks. Another example of this is the picture I have here, where if I'm give you a yellow piece of paper, or I have a yellow slide, or I'm holding a yellow marker or something, and I ask you to come up with a fruit, you might name a yellow fruit before you name a red fruit, because you see the yellow marker, the yellow paper, the yellow background, and it just triggers yellow fruits, right? So that is an example of how things in our environment can kind of activate our memories without us really trying to activate them. That's called priming. Another idea that we've studied in psychology is this context-dependent memory. So we have learned through studying environments that the environment where you learn the information can actually impact your memory. We remember better when we're in the same or similar environments. A really silly study they did with this is they actually had people learn things on land, and they had some people learn things underwater, and then they tested them on land and underwater. And they found that if you learned it underwater, you actually remembered it better underwater. And if you learned it underwater and I tested you on land, you didn't do as well, right? So greater recall happens in the same context. How can this help you? Well, you know, you don't want to change seats on a test day, right? Or helping yourself kind of create familiar environments from when you test to at your home, maybe using the same setup or having some similar familiar items can help. It's not going to make you go from an A or from a D to an A, but it could help with, some associations, right? It's about a 10% increase, right? So that might be from a B to an A. Okay, the next retrieval cue is state-dependent memories. And this is similar to context-dependent, but instead of it being about the environment, it's about an emotional or a state of mind. So this could be an emotion, like I said. It could be fear. It could be stress. It could also be induced states like intoxication or using like a drug like Adderall. And that information learned in one state may more easily be remembered in another state. So another example of this, a specific example, is called mood congruent. So this is when we find that when you are in a mood, good or bad, you recall more things that happened when, like more bad memories or more good memories. So if you're in a bad mood, you remember more bad things. And if you're in a good mood, you remember more good things. The last kind of retrieval cue or situation that impacts our retrieval is something called the serial position effect. So this is the idea that we have a tendency to remember when we're trying to think of a list or a bunch of items in a row. We have a tendency to remember the very first things we learn and the very last things we learn. So this makes sense because the last things we learn are in our working memory. They're very recent, right? So we recall them easily. So if I give you a list of 10 things, the very last thing I said you remember because I just said it. However, it's interesting, we actually also have a good memory for the first things we learned because we probably repeated them a few times, right? And so it's the stuff in the middle that gets lost, right? The middle of a list or the middle of our day or the middle of an experience gets kind of lost in the shuffle. If you walk into a room full of people and you're trying to remember a bunch of names, the first names you learn and the last names you learn are going to be the easiest to remember. All right, so before you end this video, make sure that you stop and decide if you can answer these essential questions. And that's all for now, AP Psychos. And remember, psychology is flippin' awesome.